Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a production sound mixer and boom op based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Please welcome Chris Bell.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Chris, good to have you on the podcast. You know, as this year is kind of winding down, tell us your original first COVID-19 shutdown experience.
Okay, so the last job I did was at the end of February, and we were starting to hear about slowdowns and things like that. And at that time, I didn't think it was going to be a full-blown pandemic. My wife and I still had a trip to Italy planned for March, believe it or not, which ended up not happening. And then within a couple days of that shoot, it was just email after email of everything I had booked just went away. And it was like clear out till May I had work. And I basically didn't book anything until like mid-June. I had a pretty decent summer, but not like it should be. But yeah, everything disappeared immediately. But nobody knew how to work safely.
I think some places they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. The makeup department, I think, was a one that they really couldn't wrap their heads around on how to do it safely, because they might have to spend a half hour or even longer in really close proximity to somebody. And I definitely worked shoots where they basically were saying, we're not going to have makeup. Come dressed, come with makeup on, have your hair done, and we're going to shoot it.
Yeah. We had a few that said, come camera ready. And then we also had one of the makeup artists, she would show up, she had a face shield, she had 2 masks on, and she was, super on the ball. So yeah, you run the gamut on a lot of these different. I've seen some that it was just nobody cared. And then on other ones, everybody cares, and it's so bizarre. I'm still trying to wrap my head around why we can't figure this out.
Yeah, it seems like most shoots I've been on, everybody seems to care, but I also see people get comfortable, and probably not on purpose, Or I was standing there on a shoot, and the producer come walking over, and I was next to the DP. It was an interview thing, and he looking in the monitor, and he's got his mask under his chin, and I'm looking back at the focus guy, and he's like, what's going on? But it was the producer. Can't just yell at the producer and tell him to put his mask back on.
Exactly. We've had clients that's just like they didn't care. And you're like, are you sure? You just kind of take a couple steps back, and just do what you can.
And the whole cleaning of everything, too, I think people have gotten a good handle on. But I think that people are confused by it, too. Because even when I tell people I got to mic them and say, oh, well, everything's been cleaned and it's sanitized, it'll be safe. And they're like, oh, no worries. So I don't know if they just trust me right off the bat or if they care whether I clean it or not, which I don't talk to the talent really specifically about how they feel about the pandemic, I suppose. Maybe some of them don't believe in it. I saw some people today that didn't have masks on, so it just depends.
Well, I don't know how it is up there, but down here in Florida, it's almost 50-50.
Really?
Yeah. Kind of a shame. I just want everybody to step it up and say, come on, just for a little while. Until we get this vaccine going, let's just try to be careful.
It's probably about the same here. There's a lot of people that I don't think take it seriously enough, and we're never going to get to work full time again, and at least to where we were pre-pandemic. I feel like I should have more work now than I do.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about your gear. So kind of give us an overview of what's in your audio kit.
So I'm running the Sound Devices 833, a pretty recent purchase. I have a few Lectrosonics SRBs, Lectrosonics UM400A to feed to client monitoring, SMQVs and SMDBs and SMs, a couple of those, bunch of Cos 11Ds, and talking out of a Sanken CSM1 and Sanken CS3E as well for the shotgun typically.
All right. What kind of time code sync do you like?
I had a couple nano lockets, and then I also have the TS3.
All right. And you have a Zuka cart, right?
I do, yeah, which I kind of tricked out over the last month or two when I wasn't working. I put a bunch of 80/20 on it and like did like a pivot shelf, and so I made it into something that might cost $1,000 if you bought it off somebody. So it's a good way to mod out a cart when you're bored, and that stuff's actually pretty cheap.
You've been using that for a while, or?
Yeah, I bought it like 3 years ago, something like that.
You would recommend that as a good alternative for someone trying to...
Oh, yeah. It's nice and rugged. The tires are foam, so they don't go flat, and it can take like 300 pounds of weight. And there's a couple different models. There's a wider one, too. But it's great. I bought it because I did this feature, and I knew we were going to be like kind of in the woods a little bit, in cornfields, and there's trails around this farm property, and it made a huge difference.
What are you powering the mixer with?
I'm using the remote audio, the eSmart batteries. And then I have a couple, the Sony, the L batteries on the bottom just for backup when I do swaps.
All right. Well, that's cool. Now, I saw on your social media that you had some Viviana hooks. Do you like those?
Oh, yeah. I love those. They're like the coolest little things because I kind of got my bag a lot lighter over the last couple months. And even though I don't do a ton of wearing the bag work, but I just am using the waist belt now. And the bag's probably about 11.5 pounds, which I think is pretty tolerable. And those hooks, though, you can just get it on and off super fast. I'll give the camera department, 10 minutes to do something. But if I need, an extra 30 seconds to put my bag on, they don't like that.
Yeah, I have Orca bag as well. And I think it was right after when I first went back after kind of this lockdown thing. And I was clipping in. I was going, man, I wonder if those Viviana hooks would be any better, So they look pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they're worth it. And I think they're pretty affordable. And the people that make them, I've spoken with them like on Instagram and stuff like that. They seem like pretty cool folks.
All right. Yeah, I think now that I've talked to you about it, I'll probably have to jump in and get me a couple of those. So.
Yeah, and also back to gear, I am using everything in an Orca 30.
All right. Well, let's see. Battery-wise, like for your mics and things, what are you using?
The Eneloop Pros, the black ones.
Now, have you compared those to the white ones?
Yeah, I have actually. The black ones will certainly last longer. I have a bunch of the white ones. I typically stick those in the Slate or maybe in the IFBs. I have the the Sennheiser IEMs. They work pretty good. Or even in my 633, I'll put them in as the backup. And yeah, the white ones are good, but probably not in the Talent mics.
All right. Well, let's see. You wear a lot of hats in production and post-production sound. So a lot of times you're doing production sound, you're doing sound design in post and dialogue editing too. So kind of what's your philosophy on doing all those different areas?
Well, I got into post first, and I took an apprenticeship at a recording studio, and the engineer that owned it used to live in LA and did a ton of movies. So with doing music recording, he taught me kind of the post side, and I really fell in love with filmmaking. And then he's like, well, you should learn how to do location sound too. So I was like, okay. So I did. But yeah, the philosophy of it, I think, is kind of like, I always try to explain things maybe in a camera term. People seem to understand it more. There's always this mysticism around sound. And, like editors, people who shoot will also edit. So when they go on set and shoot something, they know how to, what coverage they need, like to cut stuff together. And it's kind of, I think sound is the same way. You definitely know what you can get away with and what you can't. Like if there's traffic really far in the background, if they have to keep that take, a little noise reduction might knock it out. But if it's a semi-trailer that goes through, like it's no go, things like that. But I try to think of it like what I would want being delivered to me. If I didn't do the location sound and I was being delivered audio, like that's how I kind of approach being on set. Like coverage, wild lines if you need them, redundant miking. Even if it's an interview and they got a boom over them and it sounds great, put a mic on them anyway. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Well, let's see. So was the studio, was that Cobble Sound Studio?
Yeah, and that's in Pittsburgh. It's well, just outside of Pittsburgh. But the engineer there, Clint Macro, he grew up here, but he lived in LA for probably about 15 years, and he has something like 150 plus IMDb credits for films, and did live sound and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I worked in one studio in New York, and he used to always make us. He'd say, "Go get some production music." We'd take the 2 minute version, and he's okay. Make me a 30. Cut me a 15. And we used to hate that, but we were just like, okay, whatever. So we did it, and it really helps out a lot. It's just practice, and
Yeah, yeah. He would have me cut down he'd say, "Oh, this song's 4 minutes long. Cut it down to like 3:30 for radio, and I don't want to hear the edits." Something like that, which is great. It's good practice because you have to do it quickly. Maybe early on, I probably didn't like the pressure because when everyone's early in their career, they know a lot less. But now I think knowing that you have a finite amount of time to do things, I think it kind of keeps you honest.
Yeah. And also too, I think, having that experience in a variety of areas. Some people say, well, I just want to work in the studio, or I just want to do post. And I think it's important to have those skills in other areas. And when things were down,
For sure.
I mean, you can still edit, you can still, do sound design, you can still do those other things. And that's always been my philosophy, that, try to learn a little bit of all that stuff. And sometimes you can get jobs in those other areas as well.
Absolutely. I even did a few just short little dialogue editing things for, this guy contacted me. He did a short film and they shot in a restaurant in the air conditioning system. They weren't able to turn it off. So I just went through the scene and just kind of notched it all out with isotope, and he was super happy with it. And it was maybe a 2-hour job, which is, I wish I had more of those because it's a good way to make a few $100. But a lot of times the budget doesn't exist with the low budget short area.
In Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, what's kind of your main jobs that you do there?
Over the past couple years, it's moved away from narrative as my primary, and I've gotten more into like documentary, reality, commercials, interviews, corporate stuff, like things like that. That's kind of where things have went. There's always those things kind of just shooting.
Looking back, you did some stuff on The Biggest Loser.
Yeah, that was like a long time ago. It was actually like second unit stuff, like me and a DP and like a producer, and we did some interviews and some B-roll. And I don't even know if that stuff even went on that episode, to be honest with you. But it was fun. It was cool. We went up to, I don't know if you're familiar with Pittsburgh at all, but these Ohio Powell, there's rapids. It was really cool. So we were up on this high bridge getting B-roll and stuff. It was pretty cool. It was a fun day.
Sesame Street, you did something for Sesame Street a while back.
Oh, I was so excited when I got hired for that because I was like, oh, I'm going to meet Cookie Monster. And turns out it was a cutaway thing, which, not to say that it wasn't fun, it really was. They do a bit called Food Truck. So Cookie Monster basically wants to make something, and the ingredient they need is missing. So they have to go to the place to get the ingredient and find out like where it's grown and how it's made and everything. And my episode, it was mushrooms. So we get to go to a mushroom farm, and we had a guy on camera, and he talked all about mushrooms, and we went into the little warehouse where they grow the mushrooms and filmed that.
Well, what's been your favorite project you've worked on?
Probably the most recent one that became the most satisfying was a feature film called Unearth, because I did the location sound and the post sound, and the engineer Clint that trained me did the 5.1 part of the mix. Actually, we shot it in like 2018, but I was hired even a year before that. So I was really involved in the process from the beginning of it when they hired me all the way up to shooting it, and then post-production, going through dialogue, really working with the director, getting temp mixes out to him, and even with the composer, Jane Saunders. And she did this really wonderful, like, ethereal score. And I don't know how she did some of these sounds, but it really complemented the sound design, and we worked really well together. And it's done now, and it's kind of going through distribution, and it'll be released pretty soon.
Okay. What's it about?
It's basically a movie about two struggling farm families, and one of them sells out to a gas company and they unleash something dormant. And that's really all I'm allowed to say. That's pretty much the short and skinny.
What kind of miking setup was it? Just lavalier mics? And
We shot wide and tight, so we wired everybody that breathed as we had to. And I had a boom op, and he did a really good job of having me in his ear. Like, you can get in tighter, things like that. Yeah, he did a really good job. We actually did quite a bit of good boom stuff that made it in. I tried to use as much as humanly possible because it sounds so natural and you don't really have to do anything to it if it's done well. They were all farmers, so everybody wore cotton fabric, so it really boded well for lav placement. I can't think of an issue outside of the heat. Sometimes the mics would slip off, but I can't think of even a single issue with having 5 to 6 actors wired pretty much every day for like almost 4 weeks.
what lavs do you like to use?
Cause 11Ds, yeah. I'd like to try the DPAs, those sub-miniature ones, but I haven't pulled the trigger on those. Pandemic and all.
What kind of expendables do you like when you're miking up the farmers?
At the time, I don't think I had them, but the Bumblebee concealers, the ones that have the little wire in them, I don't know if you've used them or not. They're really, really great. They have this little wire on them that kind of just pushes the clothing out, and then you just stick it right to the chest. You can fit them between buttons. It does wonders for keeping rustle out of the mic. Yeah, and then transport.
Any other ones that you stand out that you really like?
LMC is a company that made these little rubber barrels, little ISO mounts. They make them for Cause 11s, and I would use those, and I'll wrap like Joe Sticky stuff around them. And that's what I put in tie knots, and you let the mic stick just out the base of the tie and out of the barrel a little bit. It really does isolate in a tie. Even a tie that's kind of noisy, you get a lot of isolation out of it, which ties are great when they work, and sometimes they don't. Even the next day with the same tie, sometimes it's like why does it not sound right? And then you got to, futz with a little bit. But those little LMC, I think they're called ISO mounts. They work really, really well.
I've had some issues. It's like, yes, you put it in the tie and it's perfect, no problems. And then another time, I don't know if it's the silk or it's the thread or the weave or whatever they do. It's like it's like, why is this thing making so much noise? And other days, it's like perfect.
Yeah, it's got to be the fabric. That's what I think. I've had people tell me they didn't want me to mic them, though, because they had a really nice, expensive tie. And that'll, then you got to find another spot. But then they don't want to take the tie off. And, it's just weird.
Do you do a lot of traveling with gear?
No, I really don't. I mean, local traveling, but I've never gotten a gig where I needed to fly out of state. I've been offered some stuff, and then those jobs ended up getting pushed back or something like that. So I've never actually had to get on a plane with gear. I feel like the camera operators tend to be the ones that travel more, and then they just source out local sound, typically. It's not uncommon if you watch, reality shows or shows that take place across multiple states, and you'll see like one camera guy or like 2 or 3 camera guys and the ACs, and then like 14 sound guys in the credits.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your all-time worst on-set experience.
Okay. It's kind of funny now, but it really bummed me out at the time. We were doing this feature, and I won't say anything about, the circumstance or even the names of the people involved, but we had this AD that was just tough to work with. And everything was shot wide and tight. And I remember one of the first days on set, I walked up to the camera operator, the A operator who was doing the wide stuff, and I was talking to him about the frame. And the DP walked up to me and said, "Get away from my operator." Get away. Anytime I tried to talk to him, he just would not let me near him. I don't know what his problem was with sound guys, or if he's used to working on shows where they just wire everybody and they don't really boom anything. Or it was hard. And you dip in sometimes when you know that you can actually do the shot if you had the time to prepare for it and knew the frame properly. And I did spend some time with it, the first AC, and after like the first couple days and stuff like that, and got a handle on how they were doing everything. But yeah, like to have a DP just tell you can't get near their operator to do your job. And I know he'd been in the industry for a long, long time, and I felt weird. I didn't know how to approach saying, well, look, I have a job to do too. It was a really horrible experience to feel like I wasn't allowed to do my job from somebody who's not in my department. And the AD was just hard to work with. And maybe that was just his nature, like nothing he did specifically to me, but the DP like really did kind of hinder my workflow, and I had to be pretty creative and, sometimes even hiding behind vehicles when there was characters that were behind a vehicle and they were like looking over, and I had to like hide under there with them and have the boom. It was almost touching them, and got good dialogue out of it. And they kind of got a kick out of it, but like there was no other way to boom the shot because everything was so wide. Yeah, it just had to be real creative.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had some DPs, they get upset. They'd end up telling me something. They're like, they hired me as DP, but, they're telling me all the shots, how they want to do everything. So it's like, they should have just gotten a camera op, and get that kind of stuff. And it's like, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. It's a stressful job. I get that. But I think they're all stressful jobs. If we're all a little more understanding of each other and realize that all of our jobs are important, I think the day's a lot easier. But that was the last time I had and that was like 4 years ago or so. That was the last time I had a real problem on set with a crew member, not inability to work well, but like had more of a challenge in doing my job.
You did something, it's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. What was that about?
So Fred Rogers' company, Daniel Tiger was on Mr. Rogers. He was one of the puppets. So they have a cartoon series out, and basically it's all animated, but they do live action cutaways, and they teach kids certain things like how to deal with grief or things like that. And we were part of those cutaways. Okay.
So just kind of typical Lav and Boom and...
Yeah, Lav and Boom, usually, as far as I remember, single camera. Like we did an episode where we have like a like Phipps Conservatory here with all the plants and stuff like that, and they had a small little butterfly farm, and we shot the day that the butterflies were supposed to hatch. So it was the woman who was there explaining to this little kid about butterflies, and it was really cool because we were all worried that it wasn't going to happen, and then we saw them actually start to kind of like pop out of the cocoon. So they opened up the little case, and they all just kind of fluttered out in this atrium place. It was really cool. So I did a few episodes of that. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that was one of the clients that canceled a couple episodes, and I don't know if they're going to get finished or not. But I was hired for a few extra episodes, and didn't happen.
Well, let's see. Faith Under Fire was a TV movie you worked on.
So that was actually a true story, and that starred Tony Braxton. And basically it happened in Atlanta. There was a student who went into his school with a rifle, went into the admissions office. I think it was the admissions office. And he was like holding people hostage. He's shooting at the cops that came. Basically the woman at the desk who Tony Braxton portrayed, she talked him down. Like, I don't know how long the whole ordeal like unfolded, but I know when we shot it, it was a good third of the script was in this one room, and she talked him down and got him to surrender. He obviously went to prison, but nobody got hurt and nobody died. But yeah, he went into his school, and it was pretty heavy. The weirdest and like freakiest thing for me was there was a scene where they were shooting like going out the door of the school, and there was like a vestibule that was all glass. And obviously what I'm getting was reference sound. They didn't, care so much about that, but they used like quarter loads for the guns, but it's still a real gun and it's still loud. And they were doing bursts of rounds. And it was like, all right, let's do 5, let's do 10. Okay. And then do 20. And it was scary. Like even though I knew I was making a movie and it was fake and it was safe, it was pretty freaky.
Well, out of all the projects you've worked on, is there one that stands out as being like the most challenging, like technically?
Unearthed probably was the most challenging, just because I wore multiple hats in it. And being on set was challenging in a good way because we shot in August. It was hot. So it's always challenging to shoot in extreme heat or extreme cold. But we had 20 days or 18 days to shoot it, and we had to get everything, and there was a lot on the schedule. And it was really challenging in particular because it was like 6 actors. The way they were scheduled, they didn't all work the same days. And the movie took place over a course of like a year and a half. And so that meant multiple wardrobe changes for the same actor within the same day. So I had to become very close with the wardrobe department because we might have shoot a scene with an actor and then they had to immediately go back to the trailer and get a new wardrobe. So we had to make sure they were mic'd in a way to where they could change without disturbing that. And if they couldn't, I mean, I had to, maybe have my boom op stay inside, like, oh, watch what camera's doing. I got to fly over to the trailer real quick and pull everybody's mic and get them remiked. So it was a huge challenge. And it was kind of after a couple of days, you kind of got to get a nice choreographed dance with another department, especially since, it was taking place over such a long period of time.
Mm. Were you using a lot of straps at that time?
Yes. Yeah, the Ursa straps is what I used.
Okay. Well, how has the business changed since you got started in the industry?
I want to say it's for the better overall. When I first started, like, ironically, social media, I think there's a lot of work that can be found on it, and the ability to promote yourself, like even with Instagram and stuff like that, even the film groups that are in every state and in every country on Facebook and stuff like that, those weren't around when I started. And that's only been 10 years for me. So I can remember cold calling studios and production companies and emailing anybody that could do any kind of music or sound design or film work. It was so hard just to get an email back, and it yielded in very little work for the first year or two. Then there was a lot of student films and things like that, and just cutting your teeth on the low budget stuff. But I think now, like, I see so many people that have come out of, CMU or Point Park in their film programs, and they'll just jump on the permit list and they're just like working union stuff in their grips and things like that. And I feel like people have an easier time now getting work than 10 years ago. And it was probably easier for me than it was for people 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And depending on who you work for or where you work, it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like you don't get a chance until you have paid your dues in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, there were like the whole apprenticeship thing isn't even really a thing anymore that I'm aware of. Like, and I essentially took an apprenticeship to learn. And I've even been asked that before. I've gotten people cold email me and say, hey, I see you working a lot around town. I really want to get into sound. Is there any way you could kind of have me on a set and maybe shadow you? And like, and I want to say yes, but at the same time, like, I have to politely, especially in COVID, like, you can't just bring people to shadow you. And I feel like it might slow production down. I feel like if I was going to take that on, I would need to work with them outside of a set before we could get to set. They would have to have enough of an understanding of everything and be good enough to where they could function on a film set. But the apprenticeship is great, though, if you can get it, especially in the studio, because you have your hands on everything and you have an expert showing you what to do and telling you the why something is done the way it is, and you're learning it correctly.
That's good. Now, if you could offer some tips to, say, somebody just getting started in the sound industry, what would you say?
Make friends with different departments, make friends with camera, learn the framings, learn even the basics of like lenses and like how they frame stuff, and practice mic yourself and get good at that. Because nowadays a lot of things shoot wide and tight, and it's hard to get the boom in there, especially on narrative stuff. And gain staging is another one that is largely misunderstood, and it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. I think sometimes people get misled when the production might tell them like, yeah, we want it nice and loud. Like, well, no, we'll record it at an appropriate level and, for what it needs to be. But yeah, gain staging, that should really be at the top of the list, because especially now, like, they have 32-bit float, and I feel like that's largely a marketing gimmick, but because you don't see it on the high-end mixers. And, they'll say, oh, we can just put 32-bit float on and it won't clip. I'm like, well, yeah, but what about your transmitter? What if you clip that?
Yeah, that seems to be, I have some friends that are, they're primarily camera, and I'm like, okay, you got the level of the mic, you got the level of the receiver, and then you've got the level going into the camera as well. So it's like it's like, it's too much.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah, when you're connecting all these devices together, and every camera is different. And like I have different settings for different things when like even today I was on a shoot and my buddy was the camera op and ran a hop to hit his camera, and it was the Sony A7S, and every cable we tried, there was just like a little bit of a buzz. It was probably an unbalanced cable. So I started going through his audio settings, and I just pulled all his camera audio like pretty low. And then I had an IEM receiver, and I just used the volume from that. And it was gaining up the camera too much is really what was yielding this. It was probably the cable, but probably also the self noise of the camera. So, but there's no hard and fast solution because, if you plug straight in from a line out on an XLR, you get the meters right, it's just going to always sound really, really good. And, you can use it, if you're on sticks or something. But with the wireless, every camera's different. All the settings are different. Like you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah. The guys that are going direct to camera, it's like they're struggling. Like some have audio adapters like the A7S II. It's got like, you can get a little audio adapter for it, or you can plug directly in, and there's two different worlds there. So yeah, it's that seems to be for those who say maybe they don't always have a sound person with them. They really seem to struggle with that, or it's either turned down too low, or they have other issues. So
I've run into that before too, where it's been recorded by somebody who is a camera op, and they ask me to fix it and things like that. And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And I don't know if it's like a self-imposed thing, like if somebody needs work, so they take a job because it's offered to them. But like, I wouldn't want to do like the job of 3 people on a set, or something like that. So like the whole shooting and doing the audio yourself kind of is weird to me, because how can you focus on the image and the focus and everything and focus on the pristine audio? Like I feel like you can wear a lot of hats, but maybe not all at the same time.
Exactly. Well, are there any other final projects that maybe you want to talk about, or something that you've done recently or over this past year that stand out that might be kind of interesting?
Most of the projects that I've done in the last couple months have been like commercial and corporate related things. So pretty standard fare, interviews or like 15-second taglines to camera and stuff like that. So no narrative stuff in the last few months that I really worked on, other than my buddy actually had gotten a grant for a short film. Now that you mention it, I just remembered. It's called Child Warfare. He got a grant to shoot it, and he got pretty much the best that's around here to work on his short film, and we shot over 2 days. And basically the general plot line is the President of the United States is looking at these children playing, and kind of because there's a war happening, and he gets an image of the children being in the war. So it actually shows a war scene, but it's children, and it's bloody, and there's lots of really great practical effects and a wonderful DP, and it's really, really cool.
Nice. Well, if people wanted to reach out and check out some of your work, what's the best way to do that?
So Chris Bell Sound Services, my website. There's lots of samples. Most of it is the corporate stuff because it's short in length and things like that. And also IMDb, if they wanted like a list of credits, a lot of times that works really, really well with clients, so they can kind of just see everything you've worked on. But yeah, chrisbellsoundservices.com is my website, and it has, gear list and samples of work and rate card and things like that on it. Pretty much all the information and contact info that they're going to need.
All right. Well, it's been good talking to you today. So, I want to say thanks to Chris Bell for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you're looking for more audio-related podcasts, here's what some of our friends in the podcasting community have in store for you.
Hi, this is Christian from the Sound Effect Podcast. In our latest episode, you'll hear Sergio Diaz and Zach Sievers talk about their sound design and mixing work on Gold Lion-winning feature film Nomadland. Check it out at soundeffect.com/podcast. Hey there, this is Tim from Tonebenders. Check out our latest episode featuring the sound team behind the hit series, The Mandalorian. They tell us about making the sounds of lightsabers and seismic bombs, and they discuss their approach to creating the endless array of new creature sounds that the Star Wars universe conjures up. Listen wherever you find podcasts or at tonebenderspodcast.com.
Hi, this is Emily from Level with Emily Reese. Our newest episode features two composers, Gary Shyman and Nikolai Strawinsky. You might know Nikolai from The Witcher 3 or Gary from BioShock. They wrote a score together for the game Metamorphosis. Hear them talk about it on the newest episode of Level with Emily. Learn more at levelwithemily.com or patreon.com/level.